Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, it's June already. 6 months till Christmas. I'm warning you now so you don't let it sneak up on you again. But this is the time for travel, for having fun. So make Simply Snacking a part of your plans. You know, they have 10 great flavors, beef and chicken with tons of different things. Cherries, you can have with cherries if you want, or teriyaki or pineapple or whatever. I stick with the plain stuff because I have to watch my carbs. But for those of you who don't have to watch your carbs as much, there's a lot of great options for you out there. And I want to really thank them for sponsoring this podcast because I get to interview a lot of my heroes this month. So I have an unbelievable lineup coming up, and you're going to hear one of them today. And so June and July are going to be a lot of fun. So, thank you, Simply Snacking, for keeping us going. And so everyone eat their stuff, go and buy their stuff, let them reap the benefits of hosting this podcast. So thank you all for joining me, and enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. Today I have two of my heroes, for a lot of reasons. And I think this podcast is perfect to hear their backstory. Gary Fettke and Belinda Fettke, two lioness and a lion here. They're tough people, kind, decent, and they've been through a lot. So welcome. It's so good to have you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. I'm glad you put lioness before lion.
Yeah, I want to make sure I get it right. I know who the boss is. I've been around long enough,
You know, if you're married for long enough and you're happy, you know who the boss is.
Yeah, I think so, right? It kind of works out where you all kind of, we figure out marriage and all that. And that's what I would love to talk about that because, Low Carb MD, we talk a lot about, the low carb and all the stuff that you've done, that you've been the leader in, and also, just in this podcast, I wanted to talk more about what happens behind the scenes. Like what happens when you're, and maybe in a nutshell for the three people maybe who don't know your story, what happened when you started talking about low carbohydrate diet as a surgeon, trying to prevent amputations? This is, your story has been told everywhere.
Well, for me personally, it was just fabulous because I could see the benefits for my patients, and you can see it straight away. And I actually saw your byline where it has, once you see it, you can't unsee it. I thought I told you that, but anyway.
Yeah, it was you. Yeah, it was you.
But it was just remarkable. Belinda uses the term joy of medicine. It restored the joy of medicine for me to be able to help patients so simply, or for them to help themselves so simply without operating. And so therefore, I was reducing the amount of surgery I was doing, but it was for the benefit of the patients, and a complete no-brainer. So it was on one of our trips to the US, and I was in the lounge at San Francisco. Yes. And Belinda and our daughter put me on Facebook and the social media.
So you should be telling this story to more people than just the little community in Launceston, Tasmania, right near Antarctica.
Launched that website, nofructose.com, and within 24 hours I was targeted by the sugar sweetened beverage industry. And so it's quite, we're going back 12 years, and so a few people have been talking about this for ages. But when a surgeon gets up there and says, I can stop operating and stop amputating limbs, then that had a slightly stronger message for the public. And so the industry came after me, slowly, but then steadily that built. And then I ended up being reported to the medical board on 3 occasions by people who had direct affiliations with the cereal industry. And, one of those occasions was when I inappropriately reversed someone's type 2 diabetes. We did that on national TV. You're not allowed to make people better. So
yeah, you inappropriate. I always laughed about that. I couldn't believe when I saw that. I'm like, you inappropriately cure a disease that's inappropriate. How? I'll take it if it's inappropriate or appropriate. Let's just heal my disease.
So I was being targeted, and I actually thought it was a joke. To be fair, at the beginning, I thought, seriously, I'm being investigated for telling people to not eat sugar, and at that time, just sugar. And but you have to take it seriously when you get a notification, and then I got a second, then a third ultimately. But they just kept on coming at me for a couple of years, and Belinda in her was with me going, could see my frustration that I'm trying to defend the science. This is, in real terms, this is making a difference right now. I'm talking about the science, and Belinda could see my frustration.
Who's going blue in the face, seriously.
clearly upset. So she started looking at way beyond, just support, but actually started investigating as to who was actually behind it. And her work has become a tsunami now of information about who is behind the vested interest shaping dietary guidelines, but more importantly, who actually came after me. And so she is beautiful and kind, and you've summed her up fabulously, but don't mess with her.
I said, when the cereal industry came after my husband, the mama bear came out. Like I was growling. I went, this is ridiculous. How can this group have such an incredible influence on our dietary guidelines? So yes.
And I remember when you were first telling your story, I was thinking, come on, it can't be like that. And then you were showing the emails that were going back and forth and how it's a setup. And when you threaten the industry, they come after you. And I've experienced that. I just got taken off of YouTube for the first time. Me and another old doc talking about what we were seeing in clinic. He's a hospice doctor. And he said, here's the cases I've seen in the last 2 weeks. And they took my podcast down for 6 weeks because they said that was medical misinformation of him saying what he was seeing in clinic. And I was laughing because that's exactly what was happening with you. You were seeing clinical benefit in your patients, and you start talking about it, and they say, no, you can't talk about that. It's incredible to me. And it's the same thing happening again and again. That's what we're seeing in medicine.
And I think the important thing for people to understand is that you can take back control of your health. And for doctors not to fear this going forward, we fought the medical board for 4.5 years. It's a really strange system here in Australia, unlike Tim Noakes. It was a very public trial for him to be able to speak about low carb and dismiss the so-called dangers of it. We had to do it all behind closed doors. And so we took it to our national ombudsman here. And just the only way we could overturn Gary's ruling, I mean, he was the only medical doctor in the world silenced from talking about nutrition to his patients. So we took that, and the only way they would overturn the case was to look at the actual process and find fault with the process, not with the outcome, but with the process. And so, once we got it sent to a different medical board, they reviewed it, and within a week or 2 weeks, it was completely overturned. And Gary got a written apology from the medical board. But that was 4.5 years of our lives Gary's trying to work. He had a family, we were trying to do everything and mentor and support the community and his patients. And it was a really tough time, Brian.
Yeah. And that's the thing is when you're trying to help people, because the funny thing, and I kind of make a joke about it, but it's true. It's like by doing what you're doing, you're costing yourself business, right? It's not like you're making more money doing less amputations and less wound care and all those things. So you look, it's like he's costing himself money to help people, and you think he's crazy. It's insane to me that there are people who benefit from other people's suffering.
Well, this is where Belinda comes into it, because my pathway of actually just arguing the science wasn't working. And there's been censorship in medicine and medical progress for centuries. And the trouble with the system now is that you and I have a voice, and Belinda, we all have a voice in social media. And so therefore we are a completely different threat to the establishment than maybe there was, a few hundred years ago when, whoever got up on the podium had the voice. And then you've had journal censorship for the last 100 years. But now, because we've been trying to get our information into journals and guidelines, so we've actually all now gone to social media, and as a result of that, that's a new threat to the establishment, but it's also a new exit strategy. So I was going backwards with the medical board, but Belinda was able to literally, on Facebook, when I got charged and I wasn't allowed to say anything more, we used to have a Facebook page called Gary Fettke No Fructose. And literally overnight, I thought, okay, stuff you. Belinda doesn't have the
I'm
medical
not
license.
under the license.
So we just turned it into Belinda Fettke No Fructose. And on the page, and I don't mind shoving it up the medical board, I literally just drew a line through Gary and wrote Belinda handwritten across the page, which was a complete extension of the middle finger. But Belinda's voice couldn't be stopped, which is ridiculous. I mean, she's an ex-nurse, but because she's not currently medically registered, she can get out there and say whatever she wants. Maybe it's completely different again with the recent censorship on social media, but that Belinda became
Your voice,
my voice,
but also my own voice. But I helped. I think what I did was I used my voice to give him his back. I wasn't actually his voice, because when we crossed out the Gary Fettke No Fructose and made it Belinda, what we did was I wrote specifically, this site will change slightly. There won't be as much science, but let's look into who's silencing the science. And so I didn't want people to think that I was a ghostwriter for Gary. It became very much my page because he was so busy fighting the medical board, he collated hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of papers to send to the medical board. He was highlighting all the information he felt would support the case, because as it started out just purely sugar, and then as he was learning more and more, and he was talking about processed carbohydrates and then seed oils, so he was sending it to the medical board, and they just kept dismissing it or ignoring it. Like they were not prepared to change their mind. And so that's why I decided to start looking at, well, who is the expert witness that they've brought in to determine that Gary can't talk about nutrition? And as I said before, we live very close to Antarctica. There's a catchment area of about 120,000 people here in northern Tasmania, where Gary was based. And they brought in one of the biggest guns in Southeast Asia Pacific region in nutrition. And I was like, Gary, this man is really, really, really big. Why are they bringing him in to determine, like normally an expert witness would come from the community or a broader area in the community. This man was huge. And so I said to him, I reckon he works for the sugar industry. He has to work for the sugar industry. So I started doing some research, and I'm really clever researching things, because if something doesn't make sense, I'll go down that line. But I don't know how to hack into a computer. I don't know how to do, anything technical. I was just purely determination, going and looking at things. And yeah, I think understanding that he worked for the cereal industry was an eye-opener.
So the important thing to recognise, Brian, is this became completely consuming for us all.
Totally.
You can't see behind us here, but this is our big working study area. And there was a table tennis table behind us, which was completely covered. This became a war zone.
The war room. Yeah, the war room. I remember that.
And we, it was all consuming, but we knew we were right, and we were doing the right thing for people. Each Christmas, we sat the kids down and said, "How are you guys going?" Because
we asked them other times too.
We asked them other times, but I can still remember, because it was a big family Christmas time, because they were all sort of. It was hard, my name's splashed in the paper. It's coming up on the radio. It was a media situation, and we contributed to that, because we realised we had some advice from some politicians to say, you've got two choices. You can either stay low and get smashed, or you can go loud. So we actually went loud, because the people via Belinda saved me, saved my license, but saved the concept of low carb going forward. It was really critical for my case to be won, Tim Noakes to be won, Annika Dahlqvist in Sweden, because that literally opened up the voice for others.
For low-carb and for this podcast too, because if you don't fight it, if you just walk away and Noakes says, okay, I don't need this, I'll just forget it, then we don't want to be the targets, right? And so a lot of people benefited, a lot of patients have benefited for your determination. And that's why I like the term lion, because you're very meek, you're very quiet, soft-spoken, but just don't screw with me at some point, or I will show my teeth when I have to. It's not weakness. It's saying, hey, let us live our lives. And the irony is, out of the attacks on you, it goes worldwide. Instead of being in your little corner of the world, it goes worldwide. Because of that, they made the situation worse because they were fighting with, they had sticks and you had big guns.
Well, we didn't have any guns. We had
guns. I mean, as far as the
determination.
The yeah, and the science behind you.
We had a thick skin because we're together. Because let's be honest, there were times when I was low, there were times when Belinda was low, and we were really lucky to tag team that when one was going, oh, this is just all overwhelming, and hang on, come on, up we go. And so we'd almost hand the baton backwards and forwards a bit. We're unified all the way through, but we're human. Things can get tough. And you're wondering about your registration, your finances, your reputation. You're worried about the kids.
And we had a group on social media that decided to target us as well. And there was a group of dietitians that started, even on Twitter, saying some really nasty things. And so all I did was, again, I just researched them, found out who they were, what they were doing, and then just made really simple comments. I didn't attack. I just made really simple comments. One guy he was a loose cannon and you could never control him. But the other dietitians that decided that they would defend their position, I just quietly said things publicly on their page. When they made a comment, I went back and I'd found it and I just made the comment. And I think they thought that that I'd never find it. I don't know. So anyway, that was an interesting way to dispel some of that. But I don't know if, well, you would be aware, obviously, Brian, but if a lot of the people who are watching, I actually uncovered some documents stating that 4 cereal companies in Australia were actually in partnership with the Dietitians Association of Australia. And they were paying them $23,000 a year for the DAA, the Dietitians Association, to use their members. So that's really important, to use their members to influence, protect, and actively defend not only cereal and grains, but sugars messaging. And so these dietitians have got this embedded in their education. This is their regulatory body, their accrediting body, and their educational body, who's taking money from the cereal industry and promising to do these things and use their dietitians. So when their dietitians defend these things, were they aware that their body was doing that? Or are they just purely, the end result, the soldiers for it? And so I was very careful with some of these dietitians because I thought, I don't think you even know the messaging that you're defending has been paid for by the cereal industry. And Gary's name was written in these papers specifically.
There's a lot of grief to go through when you realise your education has been compromised. Now, that's whether or not as a doctor, a dietitian, a healthcare professional, anything, when you actually realise that it's actually been completely...
And you might be doing harm.
Broken. As Belinda said, the last time the medical profession apologised to the patients was over thalidomide.
Which was horrific.
And now horrific and a long time ago.
A long time ago.
But we're actually in that. I've actually apologised to my patients. One of the really good things to come out of this is actually when you say sorry, I mean, it's what you teach your children. Just say sorry. You've made a mistake.
You're not a bad person.
You made an error. That's a classic of Belinda's. You're not a bad person, but you did the wrong thing.
But you did a bad thing.
I've copped that over the years.
Oh, you have not.
I have.
Well, Professor Noakes was the same way. You look and you reassess and you say, oh, I was wrong and I can change. But I'm stunned at how many people can't get past that in medicine, because our training, we know who trains this industry. That's just the way it is. That's the truth of the matter, right? That's who's getting paid for grand rounds. That's who has the funding. There's money. So all the med students say, oh, that's what they taught me, so that's true. And instead of saying, well, what's happening in your practice, right? And I had to assess that. And then seeing you all come along and saying, hey, we got to reassess carbohydrates. We got to reassess processed foods and see what happens. And you see your people get better and you say, uh-oh, these people who've never gotten better for 16 or 18 years, now all of a sudden are getting better. Like we were both saying, it's like you can't unsee what you've seen. And, seeing what you were, and again, the impact, because we talk about you a lot on the podcast, because you stood the ground. As a couple, you stood the ground. And part of it is, just going back is, and I wanted to touch on this for sure. It's hard. I know how it is. I'm still paying my med school loans, right? And I've been aggressive with them. And that's how much I had in school loans. And I have all these gray hairs and I'm still paying school loans. So I see these young doctors, they're in a system. They can't say anything because they lose their source of income. They're done, right? They can't afford to pay their bills. They got med school loans, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They have, family, mortgage, and they say, well, I got to toe the line. So they're choosing comfort over their patients because they know the truth on certain issues, but they can't say anything because they're a hostage to the system.
I mentor a few people in that space, not enough, but a few, where they're young doctors who actually say, I understand this, I can see there's a problem, but I can't say anything. And I said, you can say things, you just need to become very careful with your timing. And I explained to them ways that they can do that. But you have a seed in you at the moment. Do not let that stop growing. And the moment you get to the next position, whether or not it's a registrar or resident in the US, or you become a consultant or a junior consultant or a senior consultant, your job now is to actually continue that journey. I understand that you've got your financial things now and you've got to get your security, but don't let go of this core principle because it will grow. And as each year goes by, the concepts of low carb are becoming
mainstream. The American Diabetes Association.
It's in the guidelines, so that had to give you some,
the guidelines.
That gave me a little comfort too, saying it's in your guidelines. I'm following your guidelines.
We've got Women's Weekly here, which is a huge
women's magazine.
Oh, I was going to be sexist. Family magazine.
Oh, family magazine.
And they've got 3 Women's Weekly cookbooks now about low carb. So the fact is that here in Australia there are at least 5 brands of low carb beer. So one of the beer swilling countries of the world, there are 5 brands of low carb. So we're winning, and so therefore those young doctors, young nurses, wherever they are in that journey, they can feel somewhat relieved that this, in another 2 or 3 or 5 years' time, they'll be able to speak out openly about it. I've got a meeting coming up later this month where I'm speaking to somewhere about 40 or 50 endocrinologists. And the mere fact that we're actually able to have this conversation, this meeting, is a forward step. And I'm going in there open arms going, well, here's the basics. Here's what sugar is. Here's what carbs is. But, you are the establishment. You are the entrenched establishment that don't realise that the rug's being pulled out from underneath your feet. If Women's Weekly is talking about it, then if you're an endocrinologist and you're not able to talk to your patients with diabetes about low carb, then you're misinformed. You're part of the problem. So this is that educational thing, which we're all part of that journey. And whilst we still have social media with, I still think, minor censorship, we can all keep going with it. But it isn't just doctors stepping up. It's those N=1 stories, the individuals who are so powerful from continuing that message. And then when you do get into trouble, you just need Belinda by your side.
Yeah, and that's something that that's something I really wanted to touch on. Is like I see that we have a responsibility to our families, and I step back and look at it sometimes and say, do I say this or do I not say it? If it's true and I'm seeing in my clinic and I have to tell the truth and I want to do what's right for my patients, and so certain things happened where I had to be honest, like as a controversial topic when the gene modifying treatment came out. Patients asked me, what are the long-term safety data? And I said, I don't know. I don't have long-term data. I can't tell you what it is. Here's what we think, but I can't give you a definitive answer on this. So if a new drug comes out,
no, you can't even say, here's what you think. Here's what you've been told to think.
Here's what we're told to think. And here's what we are also told from other experts. And so you try to give the whole picture. The problem became, I got a letter, we all got a letter from our medical board that said, if you give any negative remarks or give misinformation, then we'll take your license. No, there was there was no equivocal message there. But the problem was, what is misinformation? I don't know what's misinformation. You don't tell me what the right answer is, because the governing boards weren't they weren't saying what the right answer was either. So I think some of these things, and in time, some things that we thought was true at the time wasn't true. So do half the doctors lose their license, or do we have a discussion and say, okay, here's the risk,
Yes.
here's the benefit, here's the possible risk, here's the possible benefits. That's what we've done. And I know you've been around a little bit longer than me. That's what we've done the history of medicine. Any procedure you do, you say, here's the risk of doing it, here's the risk of not doing it, here's the potential complications. You could die from this surgery if you get a blood clot, whatever. And then you decide together whether that's a good treatment option.
Well, you've got emails from me, and on the bottom it has, science evolves by being challenged, not by being followed. That is the scientific principle. And that, I feel very comfortable in my discussions around the whole COVID scenario when I say we don't have all the answers, and therefore, the messages given out by public health keep changing, and therefore, whilst it keeps changing and there is not a consensus, a uniform consensus of opinion, then it should be debated. It should be discussed. We should look at the pros and cons. Let's look at the data. We shouldn't just have dictatorial statements coming down from bureaucrats and particularly from politicians without having the ability to question, because that's what our role is as a doctor.
And how can it be in medicine that we've lost that? How can it be that these young doctors say, this is what they say, this is what I'm doing? We say, well,
that's our talk on YouTube called The Failure of Medical Education. Because that's, again, we're talking, we haven't really changed, the science of low carb, the science of eating well, eating healthy, the science of good metabolic health, which crosses the whole spectrum into COVID and whatever. It remains really basic and simple and scientific. So the question is, when someone comes to me with a preconception, I want to know how they got it. It doesn't matter if you're a patient, family, or doctor. So the medical one was really simple, was much easier to uncover because the Flexner report in 1910, commissioned by Carnegie and Rockefeller, literally changed medicine from being more holistic into medicate and operate. And then the formation of the American Dietitians Association in 1917, October 23 or 22?
1917.
Yeah, no, it's not. We're just getting the dates. It's either October 22 or 23.
And that's critical to know the history. And you say, how do we get to where we are now? And you see how it works.
That's right. So therefore, as a result of that, they formed what's essentially the nutritional dietary guidelines for the world. So I call that generational education. So if we've had entrenched big food, big pharma, religious ideology entrenched in our education for over 100 years, that's how we've gotten to there. So I use the term read, repeat, reward. Our medical students, our university graduates, have come through a system which is read, repeat, reward. The freedom of the 60s and 70s and 80s in universities was that you were supposed to question and have these free thoughts. We've just changed the model of education to read, repeat, reward. So therefore, no wonder these automatons. I spoke with one of our senior educators at the university earlier this year. I said, what have we got this year? And I said, sheep or shepherds? She said, all sheep.
Yeah.
And so every year, and I'm not, interesting, Brian, my lectures were taken away from the university because I wasn't following the protocol. So every year I would search for one student to try, who I went, okay, you've got a brain, you're going to be a challenge, and just really support them. And fortunately, I was able to do that. But again, you're looking for quite the needle in the haystack.
That's not all surgeons, right? You can't find one surgeon with a brain every year, can you?
No, it's a definition. Careful, I know how to take your arms off.
I'm just jealous because I know you guys.
I know how to take your arms and legs off, and you're not that tall, all right? So I actually think it's tragic. I mean, one of the things I said to the students, and I have given lectures since that my lectures were taken away. I gave them to the national body. I said, I should be an inspiration to you all, because I have not done what the system has asked me to do. I've been completely, done things which I think is of the benefit of my patients, and I still have a career. So it's okay to buck the system
and maintain your integrity.
Oh, absolutely.
You compromise your integrity, then who do you look at in the mirror?
Exactly. But I think it's really, really important to have support. So whether that's family or whether that's professional support, because it's very, very challenging, and you need to have someone that you can talk to and feel that way. I'm going to duck back to the history for 1 second, because I think it ties in what Gary was talking about, what you were talking about, and this Women's Weekly thing. There was a guy called Harvey Wiley in the 1900s who was very involved. He was a chemist in America, and he was trying to target additives being put into all sorts of things, but specifically Coca-Cola. It's when it still had the cocaine and the high doses of caffeine and whatever else they're putting into it. And every level that he tried to get through to stop it being passed, it was either blocked at the top level of government or blocked at the bottom level of government. So he gave up in disgust that he could not stop these additives being put into Coca-Cola because of their huge influence. And we're talking 1900. So he went and worked for a Women's Weekly, a women's magazine in America, because he worked out that if he could talk to the people, the women who were at the time doing the buying and looking after their family, if he could let them know what was happening, he felt that was much, much greater than trying to keep fighting it at policy level. So I think that's what we've all done. We've gone to the people. We've gone, actually, we can help you. Look what you can do. And so I think this started in 1900 because of Coca-Cola, and we are still fighting big industry now. We just go to the people. It's amazing. So
yeah, you change their tact. You go, okay, this isn't working. We can't go from the top down. And I've always believed that too, because when you take a demand away from a product, then they change what they're doing because they have to have a marketplace. So until we can do that effectively, it's challenging, because there's so much money up on top. It's hard to change that. Going after the food guidelines, they listen to you and they go, okay, we'll listen to you for 3 minutes. You got your speech. And then they go, okay, we already made up our mind before you even came in, right? That's how it works. Like when they go and vote in Congress, they already know if it's going to pass or not before they get there. The game's already played, right? So it's the same thing with the guidelines. We'll make you feel better. You could fly out here and give your talk and get off your chest, and then in 5 years we'll talk to you again, and then we'll just say whatever, and keep doing it, right? But once you get the mama bears, like you're saying, fired up about something, that's when you start getting changes happening.
Yep. And people think it's the tobacco industry tactics, but it's actually Coca-Cola's tactics that they began in 1900 that the tobacco industry followed, and then the sugar industry followed. But it's been going for. And
then the tobacco industry did the same thing. They figured out how to diversify, and they said, okay, we're going to take away our cigarette machines. We'll just put some vending machines with candy and chips in there, right? And we'll still make our money. It all works.
It all works, exactly.
So ultimately, the buying power of the individual changes the market. And I often say, if you're waiting for the guidelines to change, that'll take years. If you're waiting for the corporates to change, they'll respond to market forces. But you as an individual can change today. You alone are the one who can decide what you eat or you don't eat, or not eat at all.
Yeah, and if you don't like the policy of the company, you say, I don't want to support them. I want to support someone who I care about. Who cares about what my family, what we care about.
But the health difference, the health change can be implemented today for the individual. And that's really, and I keep saying to the people, each person, whether or not it's in this, a bigger forum like this or a one-on-one, you alone can make the decision today.
And didn't they tell you, hey, if you stop talking about this stuff publicly, we'll just drop charges against you and you can just go back to your life? No, they never gave you that option.
No. They just said, no, you're not allowed to, can't talk.
Like even in your own private clinic?
Not even to your patients.
Not even to your own patients. Wow.
Not even to his own patients.
Even if it became acceptable best practice.
That's what it said.
That was
he couldn't do it even if it became
it's accepted best practice to help your patients. You can't do that. ever again.
You can't make
incredible.
this, you can't make this poo emoji up, can you? So it literally, that's what they, so, I get a document back like this saying, you're not allowed to talk about nutrition. Or the question that I was asked, they asked me, Dr. Fettke, do you think that advising your patients to, avoid sugar is specific nutritional advice?
Specific medical advice, was it?
No, nutritional advice. They said, and my lawyer was there. He was sitting behind me. He couldn't sit beside me. And I said, well, yes. And he ultimately told me I should have said no. But anyway, I said, well, you should have given me a kick in the chair or something.
Yeah. I'm paying you, right?
But the
that was the only question they asked.
But ultimately, I got this letter back saying I'm not allowed to give any nutritional advice. I'm a doctor first, surgeon second. So I've got this medical degree, which is the very first thing we all have in common. So even if it's shown to be best medical practice, not just any medical, but best medical practice, which it is, I'm not allowed to talk about it forever.
Yeah, and it's maddening because even in our guidelines, it says, okay, to treat diabetes, to treat hypertension, to treat this, lifestyle first, discuss lifestyle with them. Oh, then give them this drug and this drug and this drug. Yeah. Anyway, just mention it. Mention lifestyle. Well, what is lifestyle? What is diet changes? What am I telling them?
But
and so it's maddening.
The stupidity is, let's say it became best medical practice and I didn't advise my patients, I'd get reported to the medical board for not giving the advice.
Yeah, it's just insane. And it has to be you two being smart people looking at it like, are you kidding me? Like, how do these intelligent people come up with these things and say, is that medical advice or is it not medical advice? Is it just, if
we
you
worked
say,
out then the medical board, I mean, I've said it publicly, they're both incompetent and malignant. I actually don't think that that's smart. I think that they're incredibly overworked. They don't have the resources to actually do things properly. And so they
swayed by a serial paid
and they're and you look where their funding comes from and all these other things, you look and say, well, heck, you're just in a bad situation. I think that's the other thing is when we want to use data to justify what we're doing, a lot of the journals are not publishing studies. They can't get it published. If they don't like what you're saying, whether it's true or not is besides the point. If they don't like what you're saying, it's hard to get it published. So if you're not publishing, how are you going to refer to articles that can't be published?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's where the smaller journals are critically important. I mean, that was Ansel Keys who gets demonized for a lot of the issues around, the Mediterranean diet and the whole low-fat cholesterol principles. He apparently, in his latter years, tried to publish material saying he got it wrong. He couldn't get it published. I don't think he was an angel.
He was saying dietary cholesterol wasn't the cause of it. He still believed cholesterol was a real problem, but he said what you eat may not affect the cholesterol in the same way.
Yeah, he had data supporting that.
And he couldn't get it published.
But he couldn't get it published, so they say, well, you said that before, so we're just staying with that because we like that better.
We like that much better.
And that's what's crazy. People don't realize that when you say it, they think you're crazy, but that's true. That's actually truth. And so that's why it's hard when there's truth like that. And then you appear fringe because you're not saying what everyone else is saying. When all the medicine, all the journals, everyone's saying the same thing, the science is settled. Well, who says the science is settled? We change approaches all the time. The surgeries that you do now are different than what you did 30 years ago, right? You get better approaches, better equipment.
I use the example of Tim Noakes whenever I see an athlete and I say, you've heard about carb loading for sport. They go, yeah, I've heard about carb loading. I said, well, the guy who wrote that, Tim Noakes, I've actually seen him tear up his book.
Yeah.
So he said he got it wrong, okay? So the person who's behind the entire concept of carb loading in sport has admitted he got it wrong. So it's whether or not I don't know about you, Brian, but virtually everything in the last 10, 15 years now, when you look at in nutrition, it's just a house of cards that falls over. You literally touch it, whether or not we add sugar or carbs or fiber or salt, and we talk about proteins and healthy fats versus unhealthy fats and it's just, you touch it and you realize, whoa, this is based on really bad non-science. Or, as I say, non-science is very similarly spelt nonsense.
And then you got the plant-based meats, which is made in a factory plant, right? With all these different ingredients that you can't tell the difference from dog food, and what says is healthy, and you're looking like, is it healthy? With all the stuff that's in there, all the ingredients.
Oh, yeah, I think it's beyond meat has just been under
investigation.
I was just going to say investigation at the moment for actually getting their protein contents incorrect on their packaging. We're just
Bioavailable versus non-bioavailable.
I don't know. I know they're being investigated at the moment. So
I actually quite like that plant-based meat.
I'm surprised that they're getting investigated. Actually, it must be. I don't know how that happens. But
Well,
you know,
they'll just flick it off. Honestly.
Eventually, you know, things come out.
It's like your concept there. Plant-based meats are actually made in a factory plant. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. Yeah. So I have a question. Was there ever a time when you're going through this and you go, this is happening, I got to go talk to Belinda about this, or give me a hard time? I know at work they were putting nasty pictures of killing your cat and, you know, just nasty stuff. Did you ever get to a point where you said, it's not worth it? It's just like, let's just shut up and go away?
We did.
No.
Because 99% of people would have at some point said, you know, it's just not worth it anymore. I'm not dealing with it. I can't save the world.
Social justice is very, very strong with Gary and I together. But Gary's history, his family history, it shows there's a strong line of social justice all the way back, which he can tell you about. But I think it was amazing. We never, ever thought we should give up. Always at our heart, we were seeing just so many people get better that we went, we've got to fight for this. And we were in a lucky position. Our children had finished school. So we thought that if Gary did lose his medical license, that we would be financially okay to work out how we could move on and do something else. So we thought that we were in the position to go, you know what, we're going to fight this. And I don't think there was ever a time when we stopped. Definitely times when we went, oh gosh, this is so overwhelming, one of us, as Gary said, but together, there was never a time we wanted to stop. We wanted to make a difference to people. We wanted to make it okay. We wanted to show the truth.
Yeah, I think that's the critical thing, is when you want to help patients, that's what we went into medicine for. Not to make the higher ups happy, not to toe the line. You know, you say, hey, what's working, what's not. So we've had all these miracle drugs that got approved that come out and they kill people. So I've always been a slow adopter, say, let's just watch and see. I don't know. There's some mechanisms I'm concerned about. Let's see. If you want to take the risk, I'll write it for you, but I would discourage you. Let's let other people be guinea pigs rather than you, if you're doing fine on the other medicine right now that's working for you, or lifestyle change or whatever. So I think there's a lot of that where I think, you know, I was telling people, usually when you are driving on snow or ice, it's not the first skid that you get, it's the overreaction. When you jerk the wheel the other way and then you go out of control. And I think that's what happens in medicine. There's a knee-jerk reaction where everyone says, you have to do this thing. And then no one says, well, let's just wait and see what happens first and see if your car goes out of control. And then we'll reevaluate.
Well, doctor in Latin means to teach. It doesn't mean to care for. It doesn't mean to make money. It doesn't mean to operate. It doesn't mean to prescribe. It means to teach. And so that's what we've done. I think most of the people in the low-carb community, doctors and non-doctors, have realised that they actually want to be teachers, pass this message on one person to another, and that is
best practice.
That's pure, and that's just the right thing to do. You know, financially, this has been a lousy pathway to go. It pretty well cost us our retirement fund, but at a personal level, what kept us going was those individual stories, and then that those meeting of other people in the low carb
community,
which strengthened us. When I was finally exonerated and this letter of apology, the first person we contacted was Tim Noakes, and he was having a coffee in Cape Town. I can still remember he's sitting, and he was on his laptop, and because Tim had been cleared a couple of months before me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the timeline on that. Was his charges were brought against him first, right, before you, and then
no,
Gary was first.
You were first.
But so Tim and I were in constant communication through all of that, and that very first low carb world meeting was in Cape Town. Tim put together, and one of my great honours in life is actually I got to introduce him for his plenary speech. So but we rang him and said, Tim, and the grin on his face,
Yeah, it was lovely.
yeah, it literally filled up. So he went right into the camera and he just grinned at us, and that was fabulous. And that, when I started this journey, I can remember many years ago, everyone started, look, I'm talking crazy stuff about sugar and seed oils, and Rod Taylor invited me over to Melbourne, who started Low Carb Down Under, and Rod had a little meeting, and there were 4 of us that presented for about 15 to 20 minutes to 12 people.
In his home.
In his house, in his lounge room. And I just, expressed my concerns about sugar and seed oils and their combination, metabolically, it wasn't going to be working well. Anyway, all of a sudden, I found that I wasn't alone. And therefore, that's really, and to think how far this message has gone within the last 10, 12 years is fabulous. So I've got hope for the future for our students, our patients, the future generation of teachers, that it'll be okay to question their education.
Yeah, I think,
but it's going to be a few people, it's not the majority.
Well, and the thing that's so great, just this yesterday, one of the directors of my old residency program called me and said, Brian, what the heck are you doing over there? I have so many students that want to come rotate with you. They want to know what you're doing.
Wow.
I said, well,
That's
they're
fantastic.
they're listening to the podcast. They're getting their information, because these are the independent thinkers that are saying, well, let me reassess, because once they leave here and they go to the hospital and they say, well, why are you guys giving them sugar if they're diabetic, and you put them on insulin sugar and you're putting sugar in their vein and you're giving them Jello all the time? Why?
Yeah.
And the old doctor's like, well, that's just how we do. We just put them on a sliding scale. We have to be able to question. I think that's the point. That's what you both bring up. You have to be able to question and say, why are we doing this? Yes. Not just because someone said we do it this way, because that's why Noakes ripped the pages out of the book. And I think the other thing that happened is some people in the low carb community got divided, because they're saying, why are you questioning some of these other things that are happening now? It's like, well, we still have to question, not to be just arbitrary and fight stuff. I mean, do what's right for your patient. You don't, make crazy claims unless you have data. Here's what I've seen. Here's what my experience is. And I think we have to be able to fall back on that and say, okay, I'm managing my patients the best I can, and here's what I'm going to do. Because there's some crazy things in the States that you see and think, wow, what have we done in medicine where we're discriminating against patients? We're not taking certain patients into our practice, or we're not going to provide care. And so it's a different thing than we've ever seen in medicine. That's why as we get older, we look back and say, this is pretty wild, And I don't want to miss out. Tell people the story about when you were pumping gas. Do you remember the story about pumping gas?
Okay. Well, I was just going to go back even further. I was a mongrel child. I always asked why. That 2-year-old that goes, why? Well, I'm still 2 years of age. Okay. I keep saying to Belinda, why are you still with me? Why? It's obviously not my good look. So you're
a surgeon. You guys, you're a surgeon. You get all the
he's
cute.
Very
That's
good
just
looking.
the way it works. Yeah, he's good looking too. Gosh,
we started going out when I was still at school, so he wasn't a surgeon then. I just fell in love with him.
They're 16 and 18. So
yeah, like my wife too. I can't use that as an excuse either. Yeah, we were in high school.
If
you lucked out.
I think you're talking to about the day. I had 11 jobs to get my way through university, and for the last couple of years I was pumping petrol, and where I literally pumping the petrol, and people would come in, check the tires, check the oil, and they'd call me boy. I could still remember all of that. And there was one guy in particular who came in every weekend, and I'd come and say, do the petrol, check the oil, boy, do the windows, boy, tires, boy. And there were a group of people, regular people, who come through and knew that I was in my last couple of years of medicine. And this guy, I don't know what he knew or what he didn't know about me. Didn't fuss. I just did my job. A year later, I'm in my intern year, and I'm working at the big public hospital. Got a white coat on, and he comes in with his daughter, and I looked after her. I was exactly the same person. My hands were cleaner, but I was exactly the same person. I haven't changed my attitude. and he called me sir. And it was, it was literally a 12-month turnaround, and I hadn't changed. It was literally the circumstance had changed. And so I have always tried, there's a great lesson in that find out who you're,
treat everyone.
Just treat everyone with respect.
Respect everybody.
Except if you're on the medical board. So I'm not entirely nice. I do have there's a couple of people that I would like to ultimately rub their noses in all this. When I catch up with them, ultimately, it will be, you were wrong, I was right,
and you made
our lives hell, but you made the lives of patients worse.
Yeah.
And I can remember one of those people is a very senior position. Early on in this piece, I said, and I was talking about sugar and carbs, and he said, Fettke, you're wrong. And I said, I won't mention his name. I said, ultimately, one of us will be looking like a fool. And then not realizing that he was, singularly behind the shafting of my career in the system. But I still remember those words. And but it's standing up for your patients, standing up for yourself, standing up for what you think's right. I mean, you encourage your children.
The humanity of putting you and your family through this, right, for financial gain or for whatever it is, whatever your bias is. And I think that's your point of the gas station pump is like, look, treat each person with respect and try to understand where they're coming from. Sit down with them and say, Brian, why do you believe this? Why do you believe this? Here's what my data shows. Let me present my side of the case. That's why I did this podcast. Let me present my side of the case. Let me present, this patient who lost 200 pounds, that they're off all their meds and they feel great. That's their story. Are we making it up? Are we lying? Or is this a real life story that got changed, right? If you put that same person on tons of insulin, guarantee that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. So it's those kind of things. And as we have more and more anecdotes, more stories, more experience, and that's why we did Low Carb MD, because of you, and Professor Noakes, because we have to say, look, until the standard of care changes, we're targets. We're all targets. But when you say, look, we listen to our podcast, we have 200 doctors we've interviewed so far that are all doing the same thing with the same benefits. We're not making it up. We're not two guys just sitting here doing that, making up stories so we can have better podcasts, right? Or the carnivores, the stuff that Sean Baker's doing. All these different people are having different approaches, and they're sharing their information, their data, and what they're doing. And I think that's important as more and more people say, yeah, this doctor's doing this. When you're the only one doing it, you could just be some crazy person. Like when you were the only one doing it, so you got singled out because you were doing something different than everyone else, whether you were right or not. You still have to pay the penalty. But it's hard to have grace for those people who went after you too. You kind of want to rub. I know what you're saying. It's like, I think all of us had to be able to say, okay, call me crazy now. So I have doctors who thought I was crazy 2 years ago. They still might, but they still call. Now they're calling me going, hey, Brian, what exactly are you doing? Right? It was dangerous 2 years ago. Now they want to know, hey, should I check an insulin level? Tell me, explain this to me now. But they're ready. They weren't ready 2 years ago.
I had that with, I was asked to do a debate on the role of bariatric surgery and obesity for the College of Surgeons. And they said, can you participate in a debate? And
as an
orthopedic surgeon discussing bariatric surgery at a College of Surgeons meeting. And they said, you can talk about diet and lifestyle. And I said, well, who am I up against? I said, who's on your team? Well, they said, who's on my team? They said, oh, just you. And I said, who's on the other team? They said, well, 3 surgeons. And I said, well, they're going to need more than 3.
That's not fair. Yeah, get 4 or 5.
Only three. Anyway, the head one, I gave my presentation, and the guy who was leading the charge on the other side, he came up to me afterwards and he said, tell me more about that low carb stuff you're talking about. And I said, I was a little bit respectful, but not much. I said, it's exactly what I was talking to you about 5 years ago. But he was starting to listen. It took 5 years. And I'm at least, as I say, I'm off to, to speak to a large group of endocrinologists. I'm trying to work out what the collective noun of endocrinologists is. But I've got a couple of thoughts there, but I'm working out whether or not I'll say it out loud on the night.
Yeah, I'm sure you got some good ones for that. Yeah, and that's hard. I mean, it's hard because endocrinologists can have a different point of view, a different perspective, and they're
They've
saying
got an education.
let's look at the sugar and that's it. And so when you can educate, I mean, I think that's what we're called to do. Like you said, is educate. Say, okay, I'll be patient. You can look at my outcomes and I'll look at yours, and I'll just smile to you and say, here, take my insulin, give it to your patients, because mine don't need it anymore. Right?
Yeah.
That's a nice thing. It's a nice message to send. But I think, like looking back, are there any regrets? Is there anything that you look back and go, that's a regret?
We regret the fact that it took so long, and it is taking so long, I guess, for, when you think John Yadkin was talking about sugar in the 1970s and prior to that and prior to that and prior to that, like this isn't new. And I think the regret is that it takes so long for best practice to really be best practice, and to look back and see the harm that it's caused. As I say, thalidomide, 12,000 children lost limbs, documented 12,000 children. There was probably a lot more. And how many people are losing limbs now because of mismanagement of diabetes? And when I say mismanagement, doing it the way the rule books say. And that's frightening. It's not just limbs, it's kidney, eye, it's just metabolic health altogether. And it's not just an individual, it's their families and their communities. It's happening to younger and younger people. So it's happening in the workplace. And it's a huge strain on our healthcare budget. And altogether, it's just a tsunami, and it's avoidable. And I think that's the saddest thing, that we couldn't be even louder to actually have changed guidelines when we're in 2014. But
you look at cardiovascular disease, amputations, kidney failure, blindness, all across the board, dying of communicable diseases. You're a lot more likely, if you're metabolically sick. So I think hopefully, because of our experience over the last couple of years, people are starting to see that more. The more people I talk to, the more people are understanding, saying, I want to be metabolically healthy. If I get sick, I want to be able to get through it. There's old docs on my last day of COVID, hopefully today, and so, had a sore throat, didn't feel great for a few days, but nothing major. It was never life-threatening for me. I was like, if this old doc can get through it, then, I'm thinking my 18-year-old triathlete's probably going to do just fine for the most part, right?
Our regrets are not personal.
No.
Our regrets are our community and the wider.
And the best thing is meeting guys like you. How awesome was it that Doug and Pam invited us to San Diego, and we got to meet up in person?
I was walking by, one of the greatest moments of my life. I'm walking by and Dr. Fettke says, hey, Brian, you got a minute? I'm like, you know me? Holy cow, this is great. This is awesome. But, but that being a person, I think that's what I've learned too. A lot of the people in the community, they want to help people. They go, look, it's not pretenses and, how many letters are after your name or how many studies do you have published to your name. It's really about saying, hey, look, here, what's working on the grassroots level, what's working for our patients, how can we help people? And so that's what the community has been about, and I think that's a huge thing. And you two have done so much, and I want people to realize that, how much just the research you've done going to Loma Linda and going into the Lion's Den and looking at their data and the papers, and
I loved it. I love going to Loma Linda.
Going and learning and researching and educating, and it's just something. Yeah. What's the best thing you learned about yourselves in this journey?
That we are an incredible couple. We love each other.
Even when she beats me at backgammon.
Oh yeah, who's the more competitive between you two? You're both competitive.
I keep saying it's not sheep stations. I just like playing.
I think I'm more openly competitive against myself. I think I've gone back to playing golf. Oh, crikey! That is competition against yourself, if anything. I was chatting to Belinda. I'm not liking backgammon again at the moment, because we're so equal that everything just comes down to chance. And so therefore I've come to
she's
realize,
winning. She's winning. Is that what you're telling me right now? It's just down to chance.
She's got bewitched dice.
She seems to be smiling.
She has the bewitched dice. I'll just leave it at that. I might use other expletives. Mind you, I got a big win last night on the last throw. A double one was enough to not get hers in, and I needed a double six, and it happened. So anyway, I smiled there. But I think, and we didn't go into my family, but there's so many odds working against you. It's about trying. I'll come back one step. We've all played games. I quite like, we play board games. We do that as a family, because what happens in games is that you work out what the rule book is, and then you can play the game. And what I've found in medicine, and the journey that we've been on recently, is that we didn't know the rule book, and the 99+% of people involved in health don't understand the rule book. We understand the rule book, both who's writing the guidelines, who's playing the guidelines, who's involved in the medical,
who's funding the guidelines,
who's involved in the medical regulation and the censorship. We understand the game. And so as a result of that game, of those rules, we know how to play it. And so we've been able to not just in the nutrition field, but help people learn how to play the game. There's not a day that goes by where I'm not contacted by someone who's been caught up in the medical regulation scenario, and we can help them by telling them, look, this is the game. And then that's it's a really nasty spot to be in. But a couple of years ago, I think I talked probably 3 people out of suicide who were in that space. So,
Yep.
Doctors that get to that point that they're so low that they wanted to commit suicide. And so therefore, that's why it's really important to have that support around you, both family, spouse, and develop those colleagues so that you find out you're not alone, because none of us are alone. It's just a matter of trying to find others that are in that space.
who's there with you.
I think that's so important. I think that's the next pandemic that's coming, is physician suicide, physician burnout, physicians leaving the field. It's a disaster.
But
And
it's not next, it's here right now.
Yeah, it's here, and we're experiencing. I'm seeing physician burnout like I've never seen. So many of the doctors. Low carb is different. Direct primary care, low carb docs seem to be happier and enjoying what they do. They're seeing their patients get better, but in the system, it's just you're rushing at as many patients. You have to be more efficient. You have to be faster. You can't talk about life, and you've lost your way. You just get a paycheck. And so it is really, I'm seeing the impact of that mentally on people, because they're not making a difference anymore. They know they're not making a difference, and they don't know what to do to get out, and they're hostage to that situation. So, and I think the point you bring up that's so important is having that solid foundation. And you say, well, if this goes away, we'll make it happen. My wife and I have had that discussion too, and said, okay, this podcast could get me in trouble. Look what's after crazy Fettke over there and Noakes. I mean, it's legitimately happened. What's our plan B?
Yes.
Do we move? What do we do? Do we downsize? You make it happen. I think when you're a team, you go, like when I left my old practice, I was making good money and everything was fine financially and all that. And I said, I'm called out. She said, we'll eat on paper plates, and we'll just, whatever we got to do, we'll just make it happen. Because I support you. It's not worth it for you killing yourself working 18-hour days. It's not worth it.
No.
But low carb and giving patients back their metabolic health that they are doing by themselves, it gives you back the joy of medicine. We started with that comment. Let's come back to it. Becoming a doctor is a teacher. And being able to give your patients the tools to get themselves better without having to go to the pharmacy, the chemist,
To the orthopedic surgeon.
to the orthopedic surgeon. I mean, it's just that really, gives so much lasting joy.
And hope. You give them hope in their eye that they could get better. Not that this is what you have. This is it.
I do it, occasionally do a number crunch. My Twitter feed reaches more people every day than I would see in an entire lifetime of medicine. And so that's the power to provide what we think is correct information. Others might call it misinformation. But that's
the only difference is who's in power determines what the good information is. I've made that point. It's like, if the Christians are in power, then the Muslims are giving misinformation. If the vegans are in power, the carnivores are. So it just depends who's in power, what's misinformation. That's why you have to be able to discuss it and say, you believe this, I believe this. Let's have a cordial discussion and see what makes more sense to people. Let people listen and then say, yeah, Brian seems unreasonable. I'll go with Fettke's thing on this, right?
Well, how about we both run for politics, okay?
You go first and we'll see what happens. I want to keep my soul. It's important to me. Yeah, it's a tough business.
Belinda was encouraged to do it, and because we're grandparents now. Local, fairly senior. But anyway, she just came home one day and said, I don't think I want to go to work and be nice to people I don't like.
Not nice to people I don't like, but just nice to, some of the people I believe may be giving the wrong information to people.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard not to get, and if Carol gets more frustrated than me, it's like, they don't understand. They have no idea what they're doing. I'm not going to get mad at you and cuss at you, but when you want to talk, come and talk, whatever it is.
Yeah. All of a sudden I went, it's a big thing. And yeah, hats off to good politicians.
Yeah, it's good people who really want to make a difference. It's a very few, but the ones who get in there and say, look, I'm going to make this better. But people like you've been politicians for what we do, standing up for what you believe, and people know your integrity. I was just thinking the other day, really, I was thinking the older I get, the fewer people I trust their integrity. The fewer people I really like. I think about Gary Fettke, Professor Noakes. I think of Ben Bickman. Certain people, I hear them, I'm like, I can't see that they're going to compromise in order to make a buck. Like, they're not going to sell their soul for, popularity or whatever. They speak the truth as they see it. And they may say, yeah, I used to think that, but I changed my mind. Here's the new data and I'm going to change it. Like, those are the people I respect. But these people who've been towing the same line that doesn't work for all these years, and if you say anything bad about it, then you're a heretic, It's the insecurity. I think a secure person will be able to say, yeah, I used to think that, but I was wrong. You don't have to eat breakfast every day. It's not the most important meal of the day, and you don't have to have cereal, whatever it is. But being able to, and in marriage too, the same thing. And that's probably it. Gary, you admit when you're wrong all the time, so that things.
No, I don't.
I know when he's wrong.
You figure it out, right? There's like, okay, we don't want to draw this out.
I'm joking. I'm joking. It's I think that's been the greatest joy actually in all of this, is that we've reconnected through this and have a purpose going forward together. And how lucky are we at this time in our lives to find this again and be excited about the rest of our lives together. So I think it's been amazing. I mean, I don't know. We say we'd go through it all again because of the outcome and because we know we've helped people in our community and further abroad. But I do think we've come really close together through all of this as well. And things happen for a reason sometimes. So how amazing is it that we just totally connected and just went, no one is going to say anything bad about this man because he is a good man. And I was fairly quiet in my previous life. And so I just went, I can't. Well, I didn't public speak and things. Right. And I just went, I've just got to stand up here because this is not right. And I think that's where we've come from. This is not right. Yeah. How can we make it better?
Yeah, that's when the quiet person, when you get backed into the corner enough, you say, okay, I have to defend it. And that's what's amazing about it. That's why I wanted people to know you as a couple, because that's so incredible. I mean, I know in medicine, it's hard on the marriage when you're going through residency and doing all these things and the craziness of life. And, you can get so caught up in that, you know what I mean? And then to see you come together like that and fight each other and have each other's back and stand up to the system and being able to sacrifice and seeing the big picture. So many people just give up. And that's why I think it's like with you and Noakes, I just think they picked the wrong two people. They picked the wrong two people because it was a huge backfire, right? Huge
backfire.
I read an article last few years, can't remember what or when, just saying that the definition of maturity is when you learn to be able to say the word no. when you've actually worked out in yourself what your boundaries are, philosophical, personal, everything. You just sort of go, okay, no, I'm not going to compromise anymore on that. And it's actually, I think there's something in that I got to the point with us and all of this going, no, that's not acceptable behavior by the system, by individual, whatever. And so when you get to that point and actually feel really solid on where your line in the sand is, then, and I've been accused of that, I'm digging my heels again. One of my colleagues said to me, he said, "Oh, you're on another soapbox again." And I said to him, I've been on so many soapboxes now that they stand together and it's called a platform.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
and
you built it.
Because you just, and as you say, look, we think we have integrity, but it's not. We feel solid in ourselves because we have that strength and that unity. Look, that platform's getting strengthened by conversations and meetings with people like yourself, so you can come and join us on it.
Anytime.
Anytime.
Yeah, I'm glad I get to have you on my little tiny platform over here. So I have to ask you on the way out so you can go enjoy your Saturday together and play whatever
golf.
Game you're gonna. Belinda's gonna.
He's off to golf.
Off to golf. So what's? I'll let Belinda go first. What's life's best medicine for you?
Life's best medicine, I think, is community and being married to this guy, sharing together. We've got beautiful local markets. I'm heading off to the market to do some shopping. So yeah, life's best medicine is just, I think, having people around you that you can trust.
That's huge. Gary, I gave you time to think about it.
Enjoy life and don't waste opportunity. I often say, we're privileged where we live here in Tasmania. We're surrounded by fresh, local, seasonal produce. We've got a beautiful climate. We've got a stable economic and
most of our family
and political system. We're surrounded by family. We have an incredible privilege, and there are vast populations of the planet that don't have the privilege, don't have the resources, don't have the opportunity. And so I get frustrated by those people that have the opportunity that don't embrace it. And again, back in my family history, there weren't a lot of opportunities, but you have to embrace that. And part of that embracing is to share that good fortune. And it's a good fortune for us as being able to work out that message of health and well-being for the wider people. Then that's our life's best medicine, is passing on what we think should be available to all. And that's a really long answer. Sorry.
No, I love it, but I don't want to keep you. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for joining me. It's such an honor to have you both. I've been excited to have you on. I know we're halfway across the world from each other, so it's such an honor. And everyone, this is wisdom. This is perseverance. The strong marriage. This is what matters. Like ultimately, careers, whatever. It's family, relationships. Helping other people, all these kind of things. These are the things we want to talk about. And we have the people who are the embodiment of all these things. So 2 heroes of mine, thank you for joining me. And everyone, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And, sometimes don't just back down, stand up for what you believe, even if it costs you a little bit. These two, if you can go back and look at their story, and I'll put some links to some of the stuff about you both, and also any talks. And I know, Belinda, you have a lot coming up. We're going to talk to you on Low Carb MD and talk about some of the new stuff you're coming up with. But thank you for your example to the rest of us.
Thanks very much.
Great to see you again, Brian.
Really nice.
Good to see you. Hopefully we'll be together soon sometime.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. support, we would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.